Hey everybody, and Tony here. And last night was an amazing and fun evening for opera in the Staatsoper Schiller Theater. Why, you ask? Because I saw one of Rossini's most well-loved and most famous operas of all time, Il Barbiere di Siviglia. And as always for this review, I have this little program here with me so that just in case I forget any names or screw up with pronunciation, I have this as my guide. The conductor was someone I've never really heard of before by the name of Michele Rovetta. The production was by Ruthsberg House. The set design and costumes were by Achim Freyer, and the chorus was handled by Martin Wright. Now, what makes The Barber of Seville a very well-known opera even to this very day? It's not just because of the likable and charming characters. It's not just because of its well-timed comedy. And it's not just because of the fact of the fact that it was based on its original source material, the first part of the Figaro trilogy by French playwright Jean-Pierre de Beaumarchais. It's more than just that. It's the music that really makes this opera well known, even if you're not an opera lover, but very well known in the world of entertainment. I'm sure that you've heard these tunes whether you're watching your favorite movie, old cartoon, or TV show, like the overture. I'm sure that everybody knows this tune. Yes, that's a very, very well-known overture from The Barber of Seville, obviously, and I'm sure that you've heard it several times in your favorite TV shows and what have you. And lest you forget, one of the most popular baritone arias of all time, and even the most fiendishly difficult, one of the most fiendishly difficult baritone arias of all time, Largo al factotum. And I'm sure you all know this passage being Figaro, 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 Figaro. I'm sure baritones have their own unique twist to this passage, but I'm sure that you all know, whether you're an opera lover or not, that this passage is definitely um, something to always know. Whenever someone thinks Barber of Seville, then they think this certain passage. So yes, this has definitely found its place not only in the opera world, but also in the world of entertainment and pop culture. Now, let's get on to the production. When I first entered the theater, I was initially turned off by the overall white set design. I was initially thinking, come on, where's the color? Where are the buildings? Where are the, the, the scenery? Where are everything in this? It seemed as though that it was just a white background with white drapes showing sketches of the city of Seville and four small chandeliers. It just seemed to turn me off at first. But my Italian friend Christina explained that this is basically how Commedia dell'arte was done at the time. And the players were actually the stars of this form of entertainment back in the days, not the scenery. It didn't really matter, but it was the players that really made the Commedia dell'arte. And she did agree, it was just too white all throughout. There could have been a little bit more color and there could have been a little bit more black. So, yeah. But the lighting definitely saved it from becoming a little bit boring. The lighting was definitely used to great advantage, along with the singers using the drapes to dramatic advantages as well. So those were definitely the saving graces. And the costumes, I'll say, were really, really beautiful, as always, to expect in an opera. So even though I was initially turned off by the production, I actually got more acquainted to it as the time went on. But the but the costumes were definitely gorgeous. and those were definitely the selling points of this opera. And something to add, because the one who was in charge of this production was German, I guess it's because that's why it was all white throughout, because I guess it was mostly because there was a little bit of that Germanic touch put into this commedia dell'arte style of scenery, so to say. But still, it was a pretty good production, and what really saved it was the wonderful singing and, of course, the great acting and the great usage of the drapes and the lighting, of course. The lighting was definitely um, great all throughout. And speaking of the singers, let's get on to them right now. In the role of the title character of the Barber of Seville, Figaro, we have Gyula Orendt, who I saw 2 months ago in the role of Papageno from The Magic Flute. He still has his round, rich, and resonant baritone voice still in touch, and he uses it to great, to great. Um, he puts it to great use. He really puts his instrument to great use, and his comic timing was definitely great. He wasn't being too hammy. He wasn't being too over the top. It was definitely um, on the less is more scale, but he still has this wonderful charm and charisma that he brings to this character. So, Mr. Oren definitely did a great job in making Figaro such a charming and likable character, all thanks to his round, rich baritone voice that he uses to great advantage. And now we have the Young Count Almaviva sung by African American tenor Kenneth Tarver. Now, I've only heard his name through passing, and that's just mostly through classical music review sites and YouTube, and even through his biography. And what I read in his biography is that he also specializes in works by Mozart, Handel, Gluck, and some bel canto composers in general, mainly singing operas from the 1700s, 1600s, all the way up to the 1800s, 1900s, and the, the 2000s, of course. And he had such a magnificent voice. His high notes were well placed and well sung. His voice had no pitfalls. It was flawless, definitely perfect for a bel canto and all those florid tenor lines in this role. Not just in the Count Almaviva, but also in other operas where the tenor has to do a lot of florid singing. He definitely was great vocally and great dramatically. He portrayed the Count as not just another lovesick hero, but also as a dignified man, a man who is very direct, but also quite youthful as well. And he wasn't hammy either. He was definitely dignified and definitely someone I really liked in this role. He uses his voice to great advantage, and he was able to conquer all of the difficult and fiendish lines of the Count to such great advantage. And lest I forget about Mr. Orendt's handling of Largo al Factotum. Wonderful. Bravo. The audience definitely loved Mr. Orendt's um, Largo al Factotum. It was well handled, and his voice was homogeneous throughout all of the registers, whether it's the low notes or the high notes. The same thing can be said about Mr. Tarver in the role of Count Almaviva. His voice was homogeneous. There were no cracks at all. It was absolutely flawless. In the role of Rosina, we have Italian mezzo-soprano Serena Malfi. I actually love her in this role. She was definitely a lot of fun watching, and this is coming from someone who prefers a soprano Rosina than a mezzo Rosina, even though the role of Rosina was originally written for a coloratura contralto and mostly sung by mezzo sopranos. But all tastes aside, I definitely loved Miss Malfi in this role. She was a lot of fun, portraying Rosina as this kittenish, minxish, feisty, and somewhat sarcastic young woman who has a lot of energy and vivacity and overall youth in her life, and quite love struck as well. But she really plays Rosina's feistiness to such a great advantage. And she was basically keeping me at the edge of my seat and keeping me really glued to the edge of my seat, just simply watching Miss Malfi do her thing. And her voice, I'll say, was very homogeneous throughout the low notes, throughout the high notes. They were all there. Her low notes were round, rich, resonant, and were quite deep as well, and really, really like gravel. And her high notes were piercing and exciting. So she definitely worked her way through the fiendish coloratura of this character throughout her first act aria, Una voce poco fa, and her lesson scene Contro un cor. She was able to sing Rosina with such finesse and such grace, and not to mention her acting skills were definitely there. I mean, she not only did the whole stand up and sing routine, but she was able to do a lot of things um, as Rosina, whether it's just standing up or just walking around or just running around and just, or even when she was sticking the letter into her leg garter. That was just definitely funny. And overall, Miss Malfi as Rosina was a lot of fun to watch and a lot of fun to listen to. In the role of Dr. Bartolo, we have Renato Girolami, who was very well known in a lot of buffo roles. Here I have to say he was amazing. Dramatically, he was definitely amazing. Whether he was singing, standing up, sitting down, or lying down, wow, just wow. He was a vocal powerhouse and he was a comedic powerhouse as well. He doesn't always overdo the comedic antics to such obnoxious levels, but he definitely made Dr. Bartola such a charming and funny character. And what he can do with his body and voice is definitely astonishing. And this is probably someone who has been singing Dr. Bartolo for years, and a lot of the other comic characters also for years. So this shows that he was an expert at his craft. So he was absolutely wonderful. No questions asked. He was wonderful. The audience loved him. And in the role of Don Basilio, we have German bass baritone Tobias Schabel. This is another name I've never really heard of before until now. And I'll say this, he was definitely a lot of fun as Don Basilio, with his hands cupped together and walking in small steps. I mean, that was really funny. And my goodness, he was tall, as in he's a lot taller than the rest of his colleagues, which is actually quite um astonishing for me because I think his height definitely makes him such an imposing Don Basilio. Not just imposing, but also quite charming as well. And his voice, I'll say, was definitely spot on. It wasn't too it wasn't too heavy, it wasn't too light. It was just right for someone who usually sings in bel canto operas. I don't really know the rest of his repertoire, but it's safe to say that Mr. Schabel has the right voice of singing such a character like Don Basilio. I mean, it was youthful. Um, it didn't sound, it didn't sound harsh. There was no harshness in his voice, but it was even all throughout, and it was such a great pleasure of seeing Mr. Schabel as the music teacher Don Basilio. And then in the role of Berta, we have American soprano Evelin Novak. My goodness, she blew me away, both vocally and dramatically. Um, she made the role of Berta very, very hilarious, especially in her encounters with Dr. Bartolo when she's like um, cleaning his clothes. She's like making these little sneezy sounds like achoo, achoo. It was really, really funny just watching Miss Novak do her thing as Berta. And need I remind you about her voice? My goodness, it was a vocal tour de force, especially in her aria Il vecchiotto cerca moglie, where in the end of her aria, she launches a high B that was just wonderful. It was a piercing and thrilling high note that she was able to pull off very, very well. So, a great kudos to Miss Novak for making a great use of this character role. And the smaller roles were also sung and acted really well by Maximilian Kuhlmann as Fiorello, Florian Eckhart as Ambrogio and the notary, and Wolfgang Bibuik as the officer. They were all sung really well, and they were all as equally funny as the six principals. So, this is no wonder why this was such an amazing and fun evening for opera. It had great singing, an interesting production, and, lest I forget, great conducting, all thanks to Mr. Rovetta. And I'll say this about his conducting. His conducting was brisk. There was never a dull moment, never a slow moment. But some of my friends said that the percussion could have been a lot stronger because Rossini is well known for his grand scaled orchestras. But that can really be forgiven because for me, the conducting was appropriately brisk. And that's what makes Il Barbiere di Sevilla great, in my opinion. When you have a conductor that really knows how to um, really keep the tempo of the opera, not just in terms of how he's conducting, but also in terms of the handling the singers and handling the recitatives and all that. So he did a magnificent job, and I really, really give him a great kudos to him for that. So, overall, it was a great evening of opera, great singing, an interesting production, and great conducting. If you're new to this channel, well, hit that subscribe button. Feel free to leave me any feedback whatsoever. And like I said, if you're new to this channel, welcome to my channel. Well, that's all for now. Be sure to tune in for more reviews and more whatever I have to upload. Until then, this is Antoni signing off and saying, take care.